we have Morty Everstein with us, head of SEO brand at Wix. Hi, Morty, how are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. We have quite a provocative topic today, almost Shakespeare level dilemma, I would say. But before we jump into solving it, can you tell us more about your background, please?
I was born at a very early age and
How early?
really early. It's my grandfather. That's like my grandfather's the king of corny jokes. That's the only one I actually use. I got into SEO from the content side of things about 10 years ago. I used to be a teacher. Before that, I was a COO of a property management company, but that was like a
Oh,
different life. I feel like I've been reincarnated already, like 3 times since then. I was a teacher in Baltimore City, and I was working for educational software after I was done teaching. And I was writing all sorts of content. And at one point, they said to me, "Hey, could you write web content?" I was one of the only native English speakers in the company. We need someone to write social media copy and web content. I'm like, I can write anything, no problem. They're like, great, now get it to rank. I'm like, what the hell is rank? And that's how I started my SEO journey. Eventually, I became the CMO of Rank Ranger, which got bought up by SimilarWeb, which is one of the SEO platforms. Started my journey at Wix. I was at little pit stop over at SEMrush for about a year, where I still consult for them as I choke on a piece of cereal, where I was the head of comms. And now I'm back at Wix for the last 2.5 years. I never really left Wix. I was consulting the whole time as the head of SEO brand, which basically has a lot to do with positioning Wix around SEO and digital marketing for digital marketers, for our business owner audience, for our agencies. There's a whole, like, Wix is an enormous company. There's like 200 and something million users. So it's positioning Wix for SEO and digital marketing for all sorts of demographics, very much heavily now for agencies and enterprise level folks. And part of that is producing the Wix SEO Learning Hub, which has all sorts of content, which I think we'll probably dive into a lot as we talk about AI and content and what we are and what we're not doing with AI.
yeah, that's right. I mean, that's like super impressive journey, and I've seen that you were in SEMrush before, and you've been like on and off with Wix. Speaking of this SEO Hub, how do you think we can subscribe to it? Is there a way, like, is there a link that you can maybe share afterwards that I can send to everyone
Oh,
who's
yeah,
here now?
absolutely. It's over at
Okay,
wix.com/SEO/learn.
so
If
yeah,
you Google Wix SEO
quite
Learning Hub,
simple.
we rank
Good.
#1 for it.
Surprisingly.
Yes.
Uh, yeah, I mean, it's not every day that you come across this head of SEO brand role, so I was quite curious. But now
Mhm.
it's officially confession time. So let's chat about AI, right?
I use it for
Um,
everything. Raise my children, vacuum my floor, everything.
I love it. I
Yep.
love it. I need your advice on that, definitely.
Don't try it. That's my advice.
Especially raising kids, that part, that's
I,
complicated.
I, I always make the joke, like, I'm not interested in AI until it can raise my children.
And generally, like, what's your overall opinion on all of this AI content hype that's been around since what, like 2022, almost 2023?
Yeah, it's like the time. I always like screw up the timeline. It's been around for a little while now.
Seems like
I
it's been forever, but
I think the greatest thing to happen to AI has been Google's AI overview telling people to drink urine to treat kidney stones. And I'll explain why I'm serious, why I think that's actually a good thing. Um, I think there's been a sort of mix up between AI did this and it's so cool and that's amazing and the technology is unbelievable, it's fascinating, it's spectacular, versus this is something I can use to talk to my consumer base with. Those are two very, very, very different questions. And that's why I'm saying, when I think you saw Google's AI overviews kind of malfunction, there's a great one. I forgot who showed it to me about, like, what do astronauts do? I cannot repeat it here. It's not even an X-rated audience. It's so off the wall.
oh
And
gosh.
all of the negative coverage that got from, like, not just like the SEO world, like major magazines, publications, kind of showed, like, wait a second, the most advanced company for AI, Google, and people think, oh, Bing was the first one to it. Google was developing stuff way, 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 way before. They just got beat to the punch in releasing it. But they were doing this for years. And they're the most advanced company in the whole world for this kind of stuff. And they're putting out things like you should drink urine to treat kidney stones. I think that people seeing that was a pause moment. I've seen, back channel conversations with people saying like, wait a second, maybe we should like rethink the AI thing. If Google can't handle it, what makes us think that we can handle it for ourselves? So that's why I'm saying the AI overview fiasco, and Google drastically reduced the number of AI overviews since then, has been the greatest thing, I think, to hit the AI world, because it kind of was a wake-up moment for us that this technology needs to mature, and we also kind of need to mature a little bit about how we think about it.
Definitely, we all need to mature, especially when it comes to drinking urine, I guess.
I like it because it's sterile and I like the taste.
You do.
The quote dodgeball.
Oh gosh, I need to find someone who's not muted for now, because we can hear this sound. Okay. Right. So what about AI and Wix? Do you guys not use it at all? Like, do you use it at some point? Is there, maybe a specific tool that you like, or, somewhere, some case where you use it?
I mean, look, we've developed a ton around AI. Like we have an AI image creator inside of the Wix builder. We have, I will, like, full confession, I do not write my own meta tags, not meta descriptions anymore.
That's helpful.
I'm busy. I got other things to do. I don't think it's that important for ranking. Google's going to rewrite it anyway. We have an AI meta tag creator. Go ahead, write my meta description. It's fine. If I have the time and I really think like it'll really make a difference, and then I guess I would. But the AI does well enough because you're giving it context. You're basically saying summarize the page into a paragraph for me. You're not saying, hey, go ahead, go hog wild and just start creating whatever you want. It's looking at the pages. The way it works with our tool is you give it a focus keyword and you say, this is the main keyword I want to target on the page. Now go read the page, come up with a synopsis. Here's 5 different options. Great, it's good enough. That's my take on meta descriptions. I'll talk about like the SEO hub. We don't use it at all. We don't. I mean, maybe for ideation, maybe like, if someone who's writing a contributor for us is looking to do ideation with AI, or, to like SEMrush has a tool. Basically, if you get stuck, like you have like writer's block, you'll take a paragraph, it'll rewrite it for you in 3 different ways. So you're like, you know what, that's a better way. I think that we're okay with as a guideline, but we do not accept AI content. We do not use AI content. Our content is completely handcrafted for the reason that it's expert driven content. It's not like, how do I change a tire? Like if you were asking me like, how do I change a tire? I guess ChatGPT could probably do that. It's basically going to the web, taking what's been done 1,000 times before and just regurgitating it, which is what content writers, let's be honest, are basically doing. They're going to the competitors who are ranking for how do you change a tire, copying what they're doing and trying to do one little step better somehow. For that kind of thing, fine. For a product description, go ahead. Have the AI summarize a pair of socks. Like, how many different ways are you going to describe a pair of socks? But when you're dealing with actual strategic content, like how do I form an SEO strategy, run an SEO audit, the kind of content we're writing for our hub, I don't feel comfortable asking AI to do any of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to the future of AI, and you think that it has to mature, do you think it will mature, and how fast is going to happen? And do you think there is a risk of AI replacing content writers at some point?
It depends, as we say in the SEO world. If you're talking about, this is just my opinion, as AI will obviously evolve, will evolve to the point where it can actually write an article the way that you want. No, I don't think it ever will. I don't think most writers can ever create content the way that users really want to create content. And my living proof is the web, which is basically filled with mediocre content. 5 ways to do this, 4 ways to do that, 3 ways to do this. Because really good content is based on, I'll say experience, but not just experience. As a teacher, right? I can have all the knowledge in my head. I was a history teacher. I met many people who knew way more history than I do. But it's how you're able to transmit what's in your head to the audience. And that's what makes a writer unique. And the AI will never be able to do that the right way. So it's not just experience, like I'm a big baseball nut. So like the example I always use is I'm writing a page about going to a Yankees game. The Yankees are a baseball team, for those who are not baseball nuts like myself. And what inevitably a writer would do now, and I'll stick to making fun of SEOs because I'm come from the SEO world. What SEOs would do is first they write a header for what is Yankee, what is stadium, then in what is a la Bill Clinton, and then they would write how to get to Yankee Stadium by car, how to get to Yankee Stadium by boat, how to get to Yankee Stadium by airplane, how to get to Yankee Stadium by train. But it's sterile. It's completely sterile. It's topically driven. And it doesn't actually speak to you, who's the actual audience, right? So if I was writing this as somebody who's been to Yankee Stadium, he moved from New York, I would write it from the perspective of here's why you should not drive to Yankee Stadium. I would lead with that because that's the most important piece of information my audience needs to know. Then I would say, fine, if you're going to be an idiot and drive to Yankee Stadium anyway, or you really have to, here's the best way to go about doing it. But the difference is I'm taking it from a situational point of view. I'm looking at it, here's the information, not in terms of topic, subtopic, 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 but here's the information, and I'm ordering it or presenting it from what you need to know first. And I'm putting my own twist on it based on my own either knowledge, expertise, experience, or so forth. So if you're asking if is AI ever going to be able to do that, I don't think will AI ever be able to go to a Yankees game? Will AI ever live in New York for 30 years and understand like what it means to drive in New York City or drive to the South Bronx like in the middle of the afternoon? No, it'll never understand that. So jobs are theoretically safe. On the other side, however, and this is the sticking point, AI, like I said before, can write a meta description. AI can write a product description pretty well. If you give, Ross Hudgens said this in one of our webinars, who is the founder of Siege Media, if you give AI context, it can do something. If you say, here's this content, summarize it, or here's a paragraph, now take it and summarize it in what we call a header, right? Write a header for me, which is basically summarizing a paragraph in a few words. AI can do that. If that's what your role is as a content creator, I would say like that I would possibly be worried. I'm not going to lie. Like that I think is something that AI, those, I don't call it menial, but those entry level or foundational writing tasks where there's not a lot of thought process involved, I think AI can and probably is to a certain extent causing a disturbance in the job market. But I think at the same time, if you are a writer who's writing and you're implementing your own mind and critical thinking and all that kind of stuff, that pedagogy into the content, then I think your job is more secure. And I think what time goes on, companies will start to realize is more secure because AI, I don't think will ever be able to do that.
Yeah, that's an amazing way to put that, definitely. And another interesting comparison I've heard is, like comparing AI with a knife, sort of like being it a tool, and then you can cook all sorts of meals with that, right? And it doesn't depend on the knife, it depends on the cook. So that's basically where.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But we're very interested about, Wix processes and content marketing. Maybe you can guide us through your content production. How do you do it at Wix right now? How many content pieces do you guys like come up with per month, stuff like that?
So I can only speak to the SEO hub itself. Like then Wix there's 5,000 people. There's people who work on landing pages, people who work on the knowledge base, people who work on the blog, and there's multiple blogs. There's the Wix Studio blog for agencies. There's the Wix blog, the classic Wix blog. Every team has their own processes. For the hub, so we basically have we have articles, we have resources like downloadable resources, like SEO audit checklist kind of thing or templates. We have podcast articles, resources, a newsletter, a webinar, and a daily news video series that we do with Barry Schwartz, which is actually not hosted on our side. It's hosted on Barry's side, but we re-syndicate it on the Wix Hub. So there's multiple pieces of content. The articles themselves, I'm going to give full credit in the writing process or the production process to George Wynn, who's the head of SEO editorial. For the Wix SEO Hub.
Like you said, you
Okay, sorry. That was someone with the mic
So
on.
full credit goes to George, and George has a whole process of like, I'll just speak to what he does from my point of view. When you're dealing with the kind of content we're creating, and it's different. Like what I'm saying now might not fit what you do in your model. We're creating content that has to serve multiple audiences, because we speak to multiple audiences, right? We're speaking to Michelle Ford, who's in the audience here, who is a contributor. Oh, like, what am I talking about? Michelle's a contributor to the Wix SEO Hub. We're talking to people like Michelle, who are SEO experts, content marketing experts, and so forth. We're also speaking to people who are just, your average business owner. Obviously, for example, for our podcast, Barry Schwartz, the king of SEOs, listens to the podcast every week. My wife's next door neighbor, where she grew up, who has a Wix website, who runs she has like a therapy website, also listens to our podcast. So we somehow have to bridge those audiences together and scaffold the content in a way where it makes sense for both. And it's hard to do that.
Mhm.
That's part of the reason that when we take contributor content, George Wynn, who runs the editorial, and Michelle can probably speak to it in the chat, because Michelle's worked with George. He's really running through the process. He's holding your hand through the entire way. Like, we are on top of the contribution process from start to finish. We don't want to end up in a situation where what we want, what we expect, and we do have very, very, very high standards for the content, are not met, and it's our fault for not giving guidance along the way. So it's almost like the opposite of AI. We're I wouldn't say slow moving, but a very methodical machine. We're planning the content out weeks, if not months in advance in some cases, because we want to handhold through the entire process and make sure that it goes through revision after revision after revision after revision. So that means that we have to plan the content out way in advance if we're going to do something like that, right? We're also, for example, there's other considerations, for example, on the resource center. And this is just a good example of how different pieces of content are going to function differently. So there, the content production is not as heavy. You're talking about a template or a checklist, not a 10-page article about user-first SEO like Michelle wrote, which is a great piece of content. There, the design is an issue, right? There, our design team is not getting just one type of design asset. They don't have to create just a banner or whatever it is. It's a resource center. So it could be a checklist, it could be a Google sheet, it could be a whole PDF, it could be a deck. And it's very agile in terms of the type of resource that they're going to get. So we have to be very strategic and plan it out in advance, because we need to give design enough time to get the materials back to us so that we can have the cadence that we want. So when you're talking about content, you're not just spitting out garbage, or you're not producing the key to creating good content is the planning. Even on our podcast, where we are much more agile, we can put out a podcast episode in a day. For example, when Google does their I/O event every year, that next morning, Crystal Carter, my co-host, and I will sit down and we'll record a podcast covering what happened at Google I/O, and we push the podcast out the very next day. But when we're talking about bringing guests onto the podcast, getting guest contributions to the podcast, doing interviews for the podcast. So again, that kind of thing has to be planned out well in advance. And we also kind of have to plan out when we have milestone episodes that we're coming up on our 100th episode in September. That's going to require planning in advance. So if you're talking about like what we do for content, if I had to summarize it in one word, we plan it out months in advance.
Wow. When you're saying review after review after review, like how many reviews is that? And who gets to review that content?
George has the lovely distinction of reviewing that content. So for example, so if we're talking about like from start to finish, the way the content kind of gets planned out, there's multiple goals for the hub. And this, Michelle, many times is true. George is the stickler, which is why we have him. He's also a former teacher, which means he's semi-sadistic, because every good teacher is a little bit sadistic, right? When you write a question on a test, when the kids are misbehaving, all week long, you get them back by running a hard question. It starts out with, and this goes, if you're talking about like content strategy, I feel like every asset, whether it be, and I'm talking about like the asset in a blog, right? Or a podcast or whatever it is, usually has multiple goals. In this case, our hub is very much a branding asset. to position Wix as someone who cares about SEO, someone who's involved in SEO, someone who's producing leading content around SEO, driving some of the conversation around SEO. And it's also a traffic asset, right? If a content hub falls down in the forest and no one's reading it, does it make a sound? So we have to do SEO on the hub,
Yeah.
or other distribution methods. So when we plan out content, it's a hard balance between, okay, what are some topics that we haven't covered yet? Just because like it's a educational hub, so educationally you have to make sure you hit X, Y, and Z. What are we doing from a branding point of view, right? Are we having enough thought leadership content, or enough content beyond SEO to position the hub a certain way? And then are we producing that's going to rank at the same time? So it's really the planning really starts out from there, and sort of balancing all those. And there's a million other factors I'm not even getting into from there. And then you're actually producing the brief for the content, getting the topics, the outlines back, and then you're reviewing the outlines. You're getting the drafts back. There could be multiple drafts. I don't want to speak for our head of SEO editorial, but I think he would probably say, I don't want to put words in his mouth, the amount of revision it depends on the piece and how much revision it actually needs. I don't think it should be formulaic. Like, we do one revision and that's it. Again, sometimes you're stuck. Like, you have to hit cadence, you have to hit deadlines and whatever it is, and you don't make, don't make great the enemy of good. So sometimes you are going to push something out anyway, but as a rule, I wouldn't say it's very formulaic, and it shouldn't be.
Speaking of traffic, once the content is produced, what's the process after that? Like, do you distribute content? Do you push it on socials? What do you do?
So, okay, I'm pulling back the curtain a little bit. Social is complicated for us because our team puts out the most content of any team at Wix. We are not, however, SEMrush. We partner with SEMrush, but we are not SEMrush. So on social media, we can't just keep pushing out SEO, 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 SEO. It has to be a balance of all of the things that people who build websites have to deal with, from design to dev to managing their team to growing their age, all these kind of things. And SEO and digital marketing is a part of that. So distribution is complicated for us because of that. We push out a lot on our personal channels as well, but we do. For example, we have a newsletter with something like almost 40,000 subscribers, because like that's a way that we can push out content where we don't have to rely on the social media team all of the time, and we can distribute the content that way, which is something that, if you're distributing content, something you need to think about. You don't want to become too reliant on one thing. You want to be able to have something where you can kind of control the narrative the way that you want to control the distribution narrative as you see fit. And that could be, by the way, like, you have a social media team who's not, and as they should not put out SEO all day long, which is not an SEO company. It could also mean that, hey, if I'm 100% reliant on SEO and Google puts out an update that they don't get right, which happens, and it destroys my rankings, well, now I'm up, blankety blank creek. You need to diversify. You need to have some kind of way of controlling as much narrative as you possibly can, whether that's an email list that you have, whether that's social media, whether that's going on top of a rooftop and screaming out, go to my website, whatever works.
Do you also build backlinks, to the content pieces, or do you usually, attract them somehow with your great content?
I will be honest, backlinks, while it's something that pops up like, oh, we can do this, we can get a nice link out of it, is part of the natural SEO conversation. It is never a reason why we do anything. Obviously, we'll capitalize on an opportunity that comes up, like, hey, you want to have me speak at your conference? Great. And they'll ask you, like, where do you want us to link to? We're not going to say, no, we don't want links. But we don't actively link build. And I will say that that should not always be the case. We're a bit spoiled. We're a subfolder on the Wix domain. Like, I don't need a link build, if you want to be honest. But we naturally get links anyway. We have plenty of links because we naturally just do create good content. We're naturally out there speaking at events, doing podcasts, doing webinars, which naturally builds up links to the hub anyway. If you are, I will say, if you are, my take on link building, and it's again, there's ask a million SEOs the question, you'll get 2 million different answers. I think, for example, if you're, I think the way I look at it, there's a threshold. Meaning, let's say I'm a new website. Google doesn't know who I am. Google, and I think, by the way, Google's looking much wider than just links. Google's looking at your entire digital presence and your digital light, because Google's like a moth. It's attracted to them as much light as possible. It'll look at links, let's say for a new website, just in that context, say, wait a second, we don't see anything going on here, fine. All of a sudden, the website starts getting, 5, 10, 15, 20 links. Google is, okay, that's a healthy, normal website. That's something that we should consider for rankings. Not because, it has 20 links from websites with a domain authority of 72.568. It's because that's a healthy, normal thing for a website to have. And if it doesn't, that's a flag. And if it does, and it gets a normal amount of links for whatever vertical that it's in, Google looks like, okay, check mark. Like, that's a sign of health. That's how I look at links, which is probably not how 99% of SEOs look at links.
Maybe, yeah, not at Wix, because see, like this is different situation. We're speaking about big company, but let's say that you were to start a brand new SaaS business, for example, you have limited budgets. How would you go about its content production? Kind of like a tricky question. So would it be SEO based?
We were, Rank Ranger was around for 5-6 years when I first started there as a content manager. Their content strategy at that point was basically to write about their product, which I will tell you something as someone who's worked for many brands, no one cares about your product. No, like, I have the best product. No one cares. I care about how your product helps me. And we grew traffic like 200% over 3 years. I will say a few things about this. One, it takes years to do it the right way. So it'll take you at least 2 years. It'll take you about a year to start really seeing real traction, and 2 years to start seeing the growth that you really wanted to. And that's my take, and my experience, rather. The content strategy there was, again, twofold. One, it was and this is not always the right brand positioning for every brand. I know every brand tries to do this, but you don't have to do this, was to position itself as a thought leader. And there's an SEO angle to that. By the way, I'll just say, as a brand marketer, sometimes positioning yourself as a thought leader is not what you want to do. You might want to be positioned as like, I'm very grassroots and I'm very community focused. And there's multiple ways to position a company beyond thought leader. I know that seems to be like the only one people talk about, but there's a lot of ways to position a brand and a new company. We wanted to be a thought leader because, for 2 reasons. One is it would give us, it leaned into who we were. Okay, we were an SEO SaaS company. We were tracking millions of keywords. So we were naturally thought leaders if we were able to take that data and translate it into something insightful. It would give us visibility by having that data covered by other outlets. So Search Engine Land, SEOroundtable.com, Search in a Journal. And that would naturally also help build links. And the link building strategy was basically focused on, if I get data point A out there, like an algorithm update, what happened with the update? How volatile? What was the average position gained or lost by a website during the update? Who knows? Well, we know. And if we can cover it, we can get that covered, we can get the link. With a piece of content like that, it's like, we'll call it, say, 10x kind of content. It's very unique, it's very specific, and it's very valuable to people. Less so now, but at the time, it was very, very hot. Other websites will take that coverage that, let's say, the Search Engine Land did, and cover their coverage. And in covering their coverage, add a link back to the original website, which was us. So that one link would grow exponentially tenfold. That's how we did that.
Yeah, that's an amazing way. And whenever you're hiring, let's say for Wix team, is there any skills, knowledge that you're looking into when hiring those people for the content production team?
Well, I haven't hired. I don't want to say that I haven't hired anybody to produce content other than saying to George Wynn, who was at Search Engine Land at the time, "Hey, you want to come work at Wix?" But what we were looking for in that case, by the way, was somebody who was able to take content and mold it, right? Someone who could take a piece of, who can take an idea and see that concept from ideation all the way to completion, which I think is something that you're looking for in a content writer in general. In case this is an editor, but it's really the same thing for a writer. You want someone who's able to not just say, okay, tell me what to write and I'll write it. I wouldn't hire that person unless I'm looking for, again, something like very straightforward, like a knowledge-based kind of thing. Like, here's the product, here's the topic. But you want somebody who's able to think a little bit about what makes sense strategically, what doesn't make sense strategically, because at the end of the day, they're the person on the front lines writing the content, dealing with the content, and understanding, and should be able to give you the feedback of, this doesn't work the way you think it actually is working. Like, you thought this would be a good strategy, but when we actually create it, there's a problem. Here's the problem. I think we should try Y instead of X. That's what I'm looking for in someone who would write. When I was hiring writers back when I was actually at Rank Ranger, that was something I'm looking for. And that was the problem, by the way. It's very hard to find someone. I had a very hard time finding somebody. It was very easy to find somebody who could write well. It was very easy to find somebody who could edit well. It was very hard to find somebody who can take what we're trying to do and run with it.
Yeah, it's really hard finding, great writers these days. We know that firsthand. And one other thing I wanted to ask you is about the tools that you're using while, you're working on your content production. Apparently SEMrush would be one of them. Yeah. Am I wrong?
As someone who's paid to consult for SEMrush, I will tell you, use SEMrush. No, Wix uses SEMrush. We use multiple SEO tools. We're all over the place with what we use. A lot of tools. I don't know what I'm allowed to say or not allowed to say. Okay, I can't tell you exactly what tools we do or don't use. I personally use SEMrush. We personally use SEMrush. We use Ahrefs on our personal team to track rankings, to see what's going on. Search Console, obviously. SEO audit tools. Screaming Frog is a big tool that we use often. We're using bot log data, which actually inbuilt into Wix, which is kind of cool.
I was looking for AI tools, I guess.
Oh, you're looking for AI tools. Well, I don't need to go external for AI tools. I'm looking for, if I create, I'll do this in my social media. If I'm going to create an image, I'll either use Bing's Copilot or I'll use the Wix AI image creator. We use AI image. We use AI tag creators. We don't always use them. I always use them at this point, like I mentioned before, for meta descriptions. Whether or not we use them for a piece on the Wix SEO hub kind of depends. Sometimes for the podcast, I'll use it for our podcast episodes because again, they're not as rank focused anyway, and I'm trying to save the time. So I use the AI meta tag creator tool for that. I'm not a huge advocate for like, here's a million AI tools that you need to use. Like you're going to have AI in your stack. I use AI, for example, to create audiograms for podcasts, not for the Wix podcast, for my personal podcast. I use it. I think it's great for transcriptions, actually. No, I'm wrong. Sorry. For transcriptions on the podcast that we run on the SEO hub, I'm pretty sure that we're using AI to, is that doing a thumbs down? Oh, nice. It was reading my mind. We're actually using AI, I believe, to create the transcripts and then manually going through and just adjusting them a little bit. So yeah, the more I think about it, the more AI we're probably using than I think we are. But it's not like we're sitting down and saying, oh, AI is like the greatest thing on earth. We're saying, like, where does it make sense to use AI? Let's use it. And where it doesn't make sense, let's not use it.
How big is your team, that's working on the SEO hub for Wix?
It's a hard question to answer because it's like overlap.
If you can answer, of course.
Between 5 to 50. Well,
5 to 50.
There's people who like, there's the core team who works on the podcast, the newsletter, the articles, and producing the actual content. That's obviously a much smaller team, especially because of most of the content, unless I'm writing it, Crystal Carter, head of communications, or George Wynn is writing an article, which we do occasionally, or we do more than often than I think we do. We're bringing in contributors like Michelle here to write the content. So we don't have a writing staff. The editing is being done by George Wynn. Normally, let's say, for example, for our newsletter, we do have a content guild, and we'll bring the newsletter. That's what I'm saying. It depends, or it depends how you look at it. I'll write up the newsletter or aggregate the newsletter. and that will go to a content writing team to take my writing and to make it, more suitable for a newsletter. I tend, by the way, every writer should know their weaknesses. I tend to be verbose, in case you can't tell at this point, and I go too long. And I know my weakness, and I'll ask the content team to please whittle that down to something smaller or shorter. So the content team comes in for that. We have an entire production going on for the podcast, both internally, and we actually externally sub out to Edge of the Web Media, and who's great at producing podcasts. So you should use them. Plug for them. So it depends. There's a lot of, like, to quote the Big Lebowski, there's a lot of ins and outs, a lot of what have yous involved in creating content for us. There's design. There's all sorts of teams.
Okay, I just wanted to say, guys, if you have some questions, please mention them in our chat, because so we are about to get to the Q&A session. So don't miss the opportunity. And Morty, I just wanted to ask you about social media, right? So can you come again? So you mentioned that social media is difficult to you for Wix generally, because you're covering this SEO part
No, it's
only?
difficult for my team. It's not difficult for Wix
Okay.
in general. For Wix in general, we have a fabulous social media team. Shout out to Amal
Of course.
Zimmerman. It's difficult for us to get the content distributed just through social for us, because we produce on any given week, we'll produce, let's take this week. I think we put out 2 articles, a podcast. We have a webinar next week. We have a newsletter coming out next week, week after. I don't know what today's date is. I always screw up dates. I think in 2 weeks. We have a daily SEO video series that we're doing with Barry Schwartz. And we have if you're in New York City, I'm going to plug because that's what marketers do. If you're in New York City on June 22nd, we're running a live digital marketing event with Search Engine Journal about how agencies and consultancies can level up their brand marketing to get better clients. So that's another page that we need to promote. That's like 10 pages that need to be promoted every week. Too
much content.
It's too much content for a company that has to talk about design, dev, agency growth, client management, budgeting, like anything that goes into running an agency and managing an agency, or anything that has to go into developing a website, designing a website, content marketing, PPC, digital marketing, and SEO. It's too much.
So you need another page on socials. That's what I'm hearing,
So now you're talking about, now we're getting to my favorite topic, which is brand marketing. So you would have to turn the Wix SEO hub into a separate brand, which has been a conversation, but that's a complicated conversation, because does it make sense for a website builder to do that or not? So that's from an SEO or an AI, whatever angle you want to take it. Like, it's like AI. I can do X, Y, and Z with AI, right? I can spit out 4,000 amazing articles with AI. I can publish 4,000 amazing articles with AI every day. Should I publish 4,000 articles every day? My answer to you would be no. And my reason would be from a branding point of view. If I'm putting out 4,000 pieces of content a day, the reader's going to look at that like, there's no way any of that stuff is actually good. Who can put out 4,000 pieces of content every day? Even though it might be great, but the perception and the brand positioning wouldn't be good. Brand positioning and brand identity and brand in general should heavily influence how you distribute content, when you distribute content, what you create, how you create, what you're creating with, and so forth.
Yeah. I'll totally agree here. But do you think overall that social media presence affects your organic visibility? Like, is there a connection? And do you guys want to eventually create that connection with socials to sort of boost your content on search engines?
Yeah. So the answer is 100% yes. I mean, from an indexing point of view, Google has said that is 1,000,000% true. You could see it, by the way. If you get an article out there and it starts getting traction on social, it will get indexed very quickly. So for indexing, Google has officially come out and said they are looking at social media to see URLs and to perhaps index them. I do think, and this is again my take, I don't have the magic, behind the scenes, understanding what Google's doing in the algorithm. But you already know officially that they're aware of URLs being shared and how often they're basically being shared on social media from an indexing point of view. It would seem foolish of them, in my opinion, to not also understand the fact that the URL is out there is also a signal. Now, it's not a signal you can necessarily rely on because they get a million bots that share it, right? But it's some kind of signal that there's a digital presence of this URL or of this domain on the web.
Yeah.
So the way I look at it, I look at link building as digital light building. Okay, you're creating a digital presence. I'm on this website, I'm on that website. It's kind of the same thing for social. My URL is being here, it's there, it's everywhere. It's the same thing for branded searches, right? If I share a piece of content on social media, or let's say I run a Super Bowl ad. I'm Temu. I ran a Super Bowl ad. I paid millions of dollars for a Super Bowl ad. I prior to watching the Super Bowl and seeing their commercial, had no idea who they were. Go to Google and type in, what is Temu? Google is a gazillion percent in my mind aware of the fact that branded searches are being done. So if I'm searching for website builder, Wix, it's making that entity connection through the branded search. By the way, in the case of Temu, when you Google them, you didn't find them. So they wasted millions of dollars on Super Bowl ads. No one knew the hell they were. People went to Google and they didn't find them as the first result. Or I think now even their Instagram is the first result. Their website is like 5 or 6. This is why you need SEO as part of your content strategy, because you will otherwise flush millions of dollars down the toilet.
That's unfortunate for sure. And you guys are working on podcasts as well. And is there any other like video format, particularly like in your hub that you're working on? Is it a podcast mostly?
No, we have webinars that are uploaded to
Webinars.
YouTube. We have a daily series that's not hosted on our YouTube channel. That's hosted on Barry Schwartz's YouTube channel, but it's syndicated on our hub. I will say, like, if I want to, again, like pull the curtain back, I've talked about this on my own podcast, the SEO Rant, before. If you're a smaller site and a smaller business, lean into video. I was talking about with Crystal Tang, because for enterprise level companies, video is complicated. Video means the video has to meet certain brand guidelines. Like you I'll go on my phone, I'll start recording something, I'll post it up, and we're good to go. If there's a whole production value that has to be there, there has to be production, there has to be the branding side of it has to align. Where it's going to live is often a question. There's a lot of hoops at the enterprise level when you're creating video, really any content, but I think particularly video. I've found particularly video that isn't always there. And it was the same when I was working at SEMrush. Like it's much harder to produce video content at scale within a large organization versus in a smaller setup. So if you are a smaller website or a smaller brand, while you might think, I don't have fancy video equipment, go for it anyway, because you're at a cadence advantage that the bigger brands are just not.
But what about the performance? Like if you compare performance of the videos and the text content, what would you say about it for Wix particularly?
It depends, and I'll talk about it in general. I've seen companies with enormous organic search presence, millions. I was talking millions of visitors, who the only way they were able to succeed on YouTube was either by trying to manipulate the algorithm or by just paying to play. So YouTube, my experience, it's either hit or miss. And it's a lot of, if you really want to get a lot of cadence, there is a lot of having to pay in order to accelerate. Unless you're like Mr. Beast, which is a different beast.
Okay, makes sense. So I'm going to read some of the questions, from our chat. And I don't think we have many. So guys, don't miss the opportunity. Join our chat and let us know about your questions. So one of the questions that we have is like, tell us more about brand strategist functions at Wix. And I think you mentioned quite a few of those, but maybe you can just elaborate on that a little bit.
Sure.
Like,
We have, I mean, there's my role, there's an entire brand marketing team. Like our team is like, I call it like we're like a SWAT team. We were brought in to do a very niche thing. So we function a little bit differently than normal Wix team would. But there's multiple brand teams. There's a brand team, for example, for the Wix Classic product. There's a brand team for Wix Studio, which is the agency level product. And there's all sorts of, from positioning to messaging to tying in branding to organic and the connection between those two, organic search and this. We're very, very, very bullish, by the way, on organic search as a channel. We love SEO. So there's an enormous brand team that's like a whole topic to itself. What does it mean for me to be a brand strategist at Wix? It's a lot of like really thinking of where are we now? Where were we as a company in terms of brand perception around SEO and digital marketing, which is a whole story unto itself. Where are we now? And I always feel like as a brand marketer, the next evolution should always be like, that's the way to go. It should be very natural, because what you're really doing is creating identity and associations, and those are created very naturally, right? It's all very unconscious. I think it's all very Freudian, but that's a whole different conversation. But what you're what you're essentially doing is creating associations between your brand and the audience, right? So for example, Nike, right? Nike's whole way of existing is built on associations. You associate us with Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan's great. We're great. I know it sounds overly simple, but that's basically what they're doing. I was watching an ad or reading an article, and the article had an ad from Michelob Ultra, which I guess is considered a beer, technically speaking. And what they do is, what they're doing in this ad is like they're sponsoring the U.S. Olympic soccer team. They're tying their brand, which is a low-calorie beer, into being mobile and movement, because like that makes sense. Like it's a latent way of saying like our beer is for people who care about moving around and health and exercise and so forth. Okay. But they're not actually saying that. And what they're basically doing is putting great soccer player and beer next to each other and just creating that association. So I don't think we always fully appreciate the power of associations. I mean, Freud did, but that's again a different topic. So what a lot of what I do is basically saying like, what are the associations that people are creating? When you look at what Wix is doing for SEO, and it's not just like, oh, we have a hub, like, so you see we're doing stuff. It's what are we doing in the product? How do we talk about it? Are we coming at it like we have the best product in the whole world for SEO? Right? That might work if like SEO was filled with a bunch of immature people who don't know what they're doing. Wait a second. Let me rephrase that. That would work if SEO was only filled with immature people who don't know what they're doing and do spammy things all of the time. But there's the real SEO community are people who are trying to do things the right way. They're people who are trying to make the web a better place. There are people who care about the ecosystem of the web. There are people who understand that it's a process. Ranking is a process, right? Doesn't happen overnight. So if I'm going to start talking about our SEO product is the best, does that really align with who my audience is? It doesn't align with who I am as a person, so I wouldn't do it anyway. But it doesn't really align with who the audience is, right? The audience are people who understand like the web is an evolution. Getting from point A to point B of creating great content that ranks. There's a lot of trial and error that goes into that. There's a lot of failure that goes into that. They say about, to use a baseball analogy, baseball players are traditionally not happy. They don't show a lot of excitement and emotion. And the reason is that in baseball, it's considered success, highly successful, if you're successful 3 out of 10 times. So like, how happy are you really? And maintaining that success of 3 out of 10 is very streaky. Sometimes you're going 0 for 100 before you start going, 90 for 100. So it makes it very hard to be like, yeah, let's like, I just scored a touchdown, right? When you hit a home run, like the amount of excitement, because it's a very streaky, difficult kind of thing to do. It's the same in SEO. It's like it's very difficult. It's very hard to maintain the rankings, especially in a competitive space once you get those rankings. So as a brand person, I need to make sure the way that I'm talking about what we're doing for SEO is in that context. Because otherwise, the associations that I'm looking to create between Wix and SEO and digital marketers, I'm not giving it the soil to be created because I'm not speaking the language that associations will be able to be created with. Does that answer what a brand
That's
strategist does at Wix? I hope
that's an
so. I don't
amazing
really know.
answer. Morty, we have a question from Michelle. Okay. Could ChatGPT or AI help branding and PR, and not just or in addition to a tool for content or SEO? If so, any ideas or starting points? So could ChatGPT help branding and PR?
Yeah, I mean, well, leaving aside any like content creation side of it, sure, probably not well. I think a lot like to me, and again, like you ask different 100 brand marketers different questions, you get it's the same question, you get 200 different responses. I still feel like brand is that one corner of the web that's very human. Because what you're fundamentally trying to do is make a connection between one entity and another entity, the brand and the consumer, or the brand and the potential audience, or the brand whoever. AI, I'm not sure if it can do that. I mean, maybe for like research, like in trying to understand like, audience demographics and that kind of thing, at the very top level research phase of maybe trying to better. One of the things you're like, let's say, I don't know, let's say I'm going to become a brand marketer about, I don't know, coffee. Or tea. I don't drink tea. I drink coffee. I don't know anything about tea. So maybe I need to build up an intuition. So maybe using AI, asking questions and trying to get like, a general like understanding, a very top level understanding of like what a market looks like kind of thing could be possible, but it's probably not what you fundamentally need anyway. Maybe I'm missing, Michelle, maybe I'm missing something. Maybe there's some kind of way to use AI for it. I don't know.
Thanks, Morty. Another question from the audience. You said that you're using different channels of organic content, and how do you coordinate those efforts in terms of strategy?
Yeah. Okay. Yes. And in a lot of ways, so many ways I'm having a hard time finding a particular way. A lot of it, like like what are we able to repurpose, right? So for example, like one of the reasons why we like podcasts is that it does multiple things at one time, right? You have the transcript that can rank if you do it the right way. In certain cases, I think it's very hard to rank with transcripts, but other SEOs will disagree with me 100% on that. It's content that exists across podcast platforms like Spotify and SoundCloud and Apple. So people searching for SEO podcasts there will find it. People searching for SEO podcasts on Google will find it because it shows up in that carousel there. All of my podcasts do. And it's also something that you can repurpose well on social. So you have an audiogram, right? So the audiogram is something you can share on social. An audiogram, by the way, is also something you can create a short out of. So the organic strategy and what's being able to be distributed and how well it's able to be distributed, because it's all one song and it's all one dance, the more that we're able to repurpose something, the more that we like it.
Yeah. Okay, let's check one more question. So I'm curious about something. Writes piece. Are you implying that SEO at Wix is primarily a brand play and isn't used to intentionally attract leads or convert potential web designers?
No,
Why?
not at all.
Okay.
Again, different teams, different purposes. Like imagine the knowledge base, which by the way, knowledge base, I'm going to say this, but I don't mean this. Like they're not concerned about ranking, right? They're concerned about making sure that the way they've described how to use the product is exactly how you use the product. By the way, Google loves knowledge-based content because it knows you're not going to try to sell anything in it. Our team, right, is focused on a very niche audience and has to consider brand in a very, very unique way, right? As I mentioned before, we're also interested in traffic. Like we rank for a lot of stuff on the SEO Learning Hub. The acquisition team is going to look at SEO and brand very differently. So there's no one size, like there, imagine you had 3 different pages on your website. They would have 3 different purposes, right? A knowledge-based page, a landing page, and a thought leadership article, a data study. SEO would all factor into all of those, but it would factor it in a different way or in a different level of importance or a different stage in its development kind of thing.
Would you have someone coming in and saying, hey, you got to add, keywords here and internal links there and, optimize for SEO, this article that you've written?
Absolutely. I mean, keywords like internal links, a gazillion percent. Also because it's really helpful for users and it's really helpful to get them to another page, right? So and which goes into a branding play. So for example, I don't want you to know that I have an article on the SEO Hub. I want you to realize that my SEO Hub is a mega center of SEO information. So if I have internal links that point to my podcast and to my webinar and to my newsletter, you get that brand perception. But yeah, like I once did a little bit of a study. So we have a cool integration with Google's URL inspection API. So on Wix, you can see in one dashboard automatically in basically a single click, not basically in a single click, which URLs Google has an index and what their indexation status is. And for one of my websites that I have for one of my podcasts, I noticed that, oh man, a whole bunch of these pages are not being indexed. I like the Shoemaker's Kids Go Shoeless. I don't really pay any attention to the SEO of that website other than to mess around and try experimenting. Like I noticed there was a gap in the algorithm that if you did best SEO podcast, Google really liked that, even though it's really spammy. So I think it's still on there on my homepage. Like, is this the best SEO podcast? Yes. Am I only writing that for the Google algorithm? Yes. So I get to like fool around with that website a lot. And the headers, I always went like, I don't care about the SEO here. I'm just going to go super catchy. A lot of idioms, catchphrases. Google didn't understand it. So it didn't index it. So when I went back and I added the keyword to the header, or in a real sense, I made the header more straightforward and then resubmitted to have those URLs indexed, they're all re-indexed. So yes, we do go back. We do optimize. You do need to optimize a page because you are writing for users, yes, but bots, while they're trying to mimic users the best that they can, are also still bots.
Yeah, that's true. By the way, speaking about podcasts, what I heard is that there's like gazillion blogs out there, like gazillion text content, but there's not that many podcasts. I mean, it seems like there's a lot, but there's not gazillion, maybe thousands, right?
I think we're starting, at least in some of the areas that I work in, I think we're starting to see a saturation. So I think you need to be careful, like what topic you're dealing with. Like if you're talking about like, I don't know, like a baseball podcast, maybe there's not. Digital marketing podcast, I will tell you straight up, like we're starting to see a saturation in the industry and it's getting much. I created one of the first SEO podcasts like in 2019, not the first, but there's only like 3 or 4 other ones. And it was really easy to get listeners back then because like you had 4 other options and that was it.
Yeah,
that's not the case.
That's true. It's the same with blogs. One day we didn't have that many blogs, right, on the internet.
Now we can't get rid of them.
No, yeah, there's just too much content
Only
out there.
AI would just like give us the answer right there without having to go to a web page, huh?
That is true. Okay, so we're about to wrap up. Because it's almost it is 5. And thank you, Morty. I mean, it's been super insightful interview and we've learned so much today. So guys, I'll be sending follow-up email and I'll also share Morty's LinkedIn details so you can connect and maybe ask some questions if you haven't asked just yet. So thanks everyone for choosing to spend this hour with us. Please stay tuned for our future events and have a nice end of the week.